The story kicks off in a palace, where a bunch of people are chatting and having a good time, until a girl grabs everyone's attention by suddenly falling to her knees. Her name is Aileen Lauren d'Autriche. A blonde guy comes up to Aileen and informs her that their engagement is officially called off, leaving everyone in the room completely stunned. The scene then cuts to a hospital, where a girl is playing on her console. She catches us up, explaining that the blonde guy is Cedric Jean Elmire, the Prince of the Empire. It turns out he was her fiancé in one of the game's romantic routes, but Lilia Reynoise, the protagonist, beat her to it and made him fall for her first. Cedric tells Aileen he's done with her betrayals and makes it clear he prefers Lilia. Aileen is shocked to hear this, finally realizing she's been reincarnated as the villain from the game she was obsessed with in her past life. She explains that the breakup with Cedric is a major event in the game's second act. Without another word, Aileen decides to apologize to Cedric and leaves. She comments that she's now living in the world of an otome game, a place filled with saints, demons, and maidens. Lilia is part of the legend of the Holy Sword, which is why in the original ending, Aileen's character dies. To avoid that fate, her plan is to get control of the game's final boss, and that's how this adventure begins. We see Aileen walking through a forest where some crows seem to be mocking her, reminding her that Cedric doesn't love her. Aileen shoots back that she's just looking for their boss and ignores them. When she reaches a castle, she tries to open the gates, but a bolt of lightning knocks her to the ground. Startled, she turns around to see a man in a robe who she finds way more handsome than in the game's illustrations. The guy asks her what she wants, and Aileen asks if he's Claude Jean Elmire, which he confirms. Without missing a beat, Aileen asks him to marry her, but Claude gets furious and zaps a tree with lightning. The shock of it all makes Aileen pass out. At this point, we get a little backstory on Aileen. She's the youngest daughter of a duke, but her family never gave her the time of day because she wasn't as skilled as her siblings. At age 8, Prince Cedric proposed to her, and from that moment on, her dream was to become an empress. When she wakes up, Aileen sees Claude's two assistants, Keith and Belzebuth. The three are arguing about her visit, thinking it might be a trap, but she denies it, explaining she came on her own. This is where we learn that Claude is Cedric's half-brother, who was stripped of his right to the throne because of his demonic tendencies. Still, they let him live in exile thanks to a peace treaty between humans and demons. If that treaty is broken, Claude becomes the final boss, and Aileen dies. Aileen asks Claude once again if he wants to marry her, but he turns her down and tells Keith and Belzebuth to kick her out of the castle. Aileen makes it clear she's not leaving until he says yes, and Claude, a bit embarrassed, asks if she's really in love with him. She says no, and when she tries to explain her reasons, Claude tries to force her out with magic. The blonde instantly switches tactics and flirts with him a little before leaving. The next day, Aileen meets with the Prime Minister, who gives her an invitation from Cedric to his engagement ball. Aileen accepts, and later we see her trying to get back into Claude's castle, this time by winning over the crows with food. One of the crows collapses because the food was laced with sleeping powder. Claude senses what happened and appears to heal the crow. Once in the castle, Aileen tells him about Cedric and Lilia's ball, which is in 2 months. Since she needed a date, she asks Claude if he wants to go with her. Their conversation is cut short by the crow, nicknamed Almond. He tells them that a Fenrir escaped and is now loose in the human school, so they have to stop it before it causes any trouble. Aileen offers to help and is transported nearby. There, she finds the Fenrir being bullied by some students and steps in to make them leave it alone. The Fenrir's mother shows up, scaring the kids away, and Aileen uses the chance to return the cub to her. Just then, Cedric appears and accuses Aileen of trying to start a war between humans and demons. But Claude intervenes, stepping out of a portal, and kneels before her. He thanks her for risking a false accusation to protect the peace treaty, which shuts everyone up. Claude summons a carriage and takes Aileen away. During the ride, he asks what her real intentions are for wanting to marry him. Aileen tells him the whole truth. Although he doesn't believe her, he takes her home, but not before confirming he'll go to the ball with her. The next morning, the Prime Minister informs Aileen that Cedric plans to take over her family's businesses. He warns her she only has 2 months to sort things out, or she'll lose her house. Later, Aileen meets up with a guy named Jasper Very to ask for his help. We then see her in a scene with Claude, Keith and Belzebuth, where she explains her plan. She's going to bring the employees Cedric unjustly fired to work at and decorate the castle. Claude agrees and tasks Keith with investigating the nobles because apparently they haven't been paid in a while. Aileen tells him she already took care of it and asks Jasper to look into it. Claude is surprised but lets it slide. Then Aileen asks if she can use a piece of the castle grounds for a farm, and he agrees. However, he takes the opportunity to curse her shadow. Claude explains it was necessary so the demons would let her go wherever she wanted. The Fenrir she had rescued emerges from the shadow and starts playing with her. The blonde decides to name it Ribbon. Later, Aileen meets with Jasper and the former employees in the forest, and together they go to the castle to talk to Claude, who gives them several urgent jobs on his lands. After the meeting, the employees leave with Belzebuth to get started. Aileen asks Claude why he's so tense and sad, but he just walks away without answering. The former employees get to work, trying to figure out how to create beauty products to launch a company under Claude's control. While all this is happening, Cedric continues to investigate Aileen's movements, growing more suspicious. That night, Aileen is pondering how to sell the beauty products. Just then, Belzebuth appears and asks if he can go to the ball, since all the humans who hate Claude will be there, and he wants to be there to defend him. Aileen agrees, but on the condition that he learns some manners, which Belzebuth accepts. Days later, we see the former employees and several demons working around the castle. Claude is chatting with Aileen on the balcony when Keith and Jasper interrupt them. They've come to tell them about a rumor going around that Aileen wants to harm Lilia. Jasper explains that Lilia has been receiving threatening letters written in perfect handwriting and bearing the seal of Aileen's family. She asks Almond to find any lost papers from the nobles that might help. The day of the ball arrives, and Aileen attends wearing a dress that Claude gave her. There, she runs into one of the former employees, who confirms that Almond found the letter that proves her innocence. The only problem is that Lilia is nowhere to be found. Aileen remembers an event in the game where Lilia gets kidnapped and wonders if she can change things to avoid ending up as the culprit. Right at that moment, Cedric appears and orders her arrest. Meanwhile, Lilia is at Claude's castle. He starts to get suspicious of her, and Lilia confesses she's there because she knows Aileen will try to do something to her. Lilia's holy presence begins to affect Claude, who, now annoyed, gets up and takes her back to the ball. Back with Aileen, she defends herself from Cedric's accusations and taunts him a little. Cedric gets angry and is about to hurt her to make her confess, but Claude arrives to stop him. Aileen seizes the opportunity to use the letter Almond found and prove to everyone that she had nothing to do with Lilia's kidnapping. Once she proves her innocence, she signs an agreement with Cedric to nullify the engagement. After signing, Claude asks her to dance. Later that night, Aileen thanks Claude for his help, though she finds it weird that Cedric hasn't announced his engagement to Lilia. Aileen starts talking about her insecurities and how she feels inferior to Lilia, but Claude cuts her off to tell her that Lilia isn't his type. They look at each other and end up kissing. In that instant, Aileen once again sees the tragic ending where she could die. Claude says his goodbyes, and Aileen reflects that the reason he lost faith in humanity was because of the betrayal of the one human he had trusted. Days later, we see Keith waking up and, to his surprise, finding Aileen there. Belzebuth reacts quickly, threatening him with a dagger. Keith, very nervous, asks them what they're doing outside the barrier. Aileen questions him, wanting to know if he's up to something behind Claude's back. She tells him she finds it very suspicious that he hasn't said anything about Claude's missing funds. Aileen explains that the only way the peace treaty can be broken is if Claude loses control, and the only way to make that happen would be for his most loyal servant to betray him. This accusation leaves Keith speechless, and he decides to tell her his history with Claude. He says he met him when he was 5, when he was drowning in the garden's lake. Claude used his magic to save him, but for revealing his powers, the nobility exiled him. Keith got Claude the castle through a deal with a noble, but the noble tricked him. In exchange for living in peace, he had to hand over demons as slaves. Hearing this, Aileen remembers an event from the game, Keith's death. In that part, Lilia and Cedric accuse him of enslaving demons and have him executed, which enrages Claude so much that he tries to destroy the world. Later, Aileen meets with the former employees to find a solution, but their efforts are pointless because Cedric and Lilia are about to arrive at the castle. Claude tells them to leave, but the couple refuses to budge. Aileen steps in, and Lilia greets her pleasantly. The blonde explains that while demon slavery goes against the pact, it's not technically illegal, as buying and selling demons is more of an ethical issue. Lilia asks if she feels bad for selling those demons, to which Aileen replies that such matters shouldn't concern her. Lilia leaves the castle in tears, and Keith uses the moment to confess everything to Claude, who understands and tells him to proceed with his plan. It's explained that the demons offer to be sold to help Claude, and that Keith made sure their buyers would take good care of them. When the buyers arrive, Keith, with Belzebuth's help, snatches the accounting book from the noble and defends himself from the group, dodging their attacks and taking them down. After defeating them, he locks them in a cage and sends them back to the city. Aileen wonders why Lilia and Cedric haven't shown up, and at that very moment, Cedric appears out of nowhere and knocks Keith out. Lilia summons the Holy Sword to threaten them and injures Belzebuth. Then, Cedric knocks Aileen unconscious. She wakes up later, tied to a bed, as Cedric tries to assault her. Claude bursts in, destroying the room to stop him, but he loses control to his rage and transforms into a demon. Lilia tries to attack him with her sword, but Aileen gets in the way and takes the hit. She snatches the sword from her and hugs Claude, begging him to return to his human form. He manages to calm down, thus preventing the game's catastrophic ending. The next day, Aileen and Claude get ready for the ceremony for the Empire's new heir. To many people's surprise, they receive Claude warmly, accepting him as their new king. Sometime later, a mysterious blonde boy arrives in the city in a carriage, commenting that the game isn't over for Aileen just yet. This boy is greeted by Augusta Zelm, the student council vice president, who asks him if he's anicaps, and the boy confirms it. A month before this, we see Aileen and Claude chatting. She suggests it would be a good idea for them to sleep together. Keith interrupts to inform them that the demon Astarte has sent a message on behalf of Merceta. The message is about some rebel demons who disobeyed orders and attacked a human village. Aileen immediately recognizes this event from the game, which takes place at the school, where demons tried to destroy the Principality of Merceta after Claude's death in the first version. Aileen explains that in the current timeline, if the Principality falls, people will blame Claude and his title as heir will be revoked, so she has to stop it at all costs. Claude realizes that Astarte's real goal is to kill Aileen, so he decides to go to that region to capture him. Aileen offers to help, but Claude refuses. Keith adds that Merceta is a place with very old-fashioned and sexist views, even towards the wielder of the Holy Sword, so he asks Aileen to stay in the capital. She thinks about the events of the game's sequel and remembers there's an item that can drive monsters mad. Before Claude leaves, Aileen asks him not to use his magic to visit her, otherwise she'll break off their engagement. Back in the present, we learn that Aileen has infiltrated Merceta, posing as a boy named El, to investigate what's happening at the school. Soon after arriving, she walks into a scene where a boy is mistreating another student just for not putting sugar in his coffee. Aileen doesn't hesitate and steps in to defend him, knocking down the bully in a fight and advising the victim to stay away from him. Auguste takes Aileen to the student council and introduces her to Kyle and Walt. Aileen tells us that these three are the main romance options in the sequel, and the best ending is achieved when Auguste uses Lilia's holy sword to defeat the demons. However, the game's final boss is none other than the student council president, James Charles. She reveals that, in the story, James is a half-demon who should have been the Prince of Merceta, but he lives under constant death threats because the church wants him eliminated. The next day, the girl Aileen defended introduces herself as Rachel Dennis. Aileen recognizes the name instantly. She's the villain of the second game. After class, Aileen starts spying on Selena Gilbert, the heroine of this sequel and a huge fan of Lilia. Meanwhile, Keith informs Claude that the Prince of Merceta's son has donated a fortune to the church to get rid of James for being a half-demon. Hearing this, Claude decides to investigate the matter more deeply. Back with Aileen, she joins the student council. As a test, James asks her to investigate what happened to a student who was bitten by a vampire demon. Aileen asks if she can form a security squad, since the case involves demons, but James tells her she'd have to talk to Claude about that, as he has more authority. Aileen goes to Claude's office, dressed as a duck, to ask him to sign off on the security squad. He's a bit hesitant seeing her in that costume, but he eventually agrees. That night, Aileen and one of her employees, Isaac, are on patrol investigating the case of the bitten girl when they run into Rachel with the Academy's professor. They spy on them and discover that Rachel is the one behind the vampire incident. They soon realize the professor is the actual vampire, so they decide to confront him. The professor manages to escape, but James catches him using his demon form, which worries Aileen since that wasn't supposed to happen yet. Suddenly, she senses someone approaching and warns James to run. Someone brushes past her cheek. It was Walt. James gets away quickly, and Walt, suspicious of Aileen, pulls off her scarf and confirms she's a woman. After discovering her, he questions her to find out who she really is. Aileen, with no other choice, threatens Walt, telling him she knows everything about him. She reveals she knows that he and Kyle do the church's dirty work and deduces they're secretly trained demon hunters who use a special incense to boost their strength. She also tells him she knows why they're at the academy. Aileen promises not to say a word about what she saw, but in return, he has to keep her gender a secret. Walt agrees to the deal and they go to question Rachel. Once in a room, Rachel tells them she just wanted to save a friend from her abusive fiancé. Isaac asks if the victim was her friend, and Rachel confirms it. Isaac comes up with a plan to punish the professor without putting anyone at risk, explaining that the guy is drowning in debt from his gambling addiction. The next day, Isaac meets with Aileen and tells her he played poker with the professor and won everything, leaving him broke. Rachel enters the room to announce she's breaking off her current engagement to find a better man, but she needs Aileen's help, which she agrees to. Rachel leaves to go clean the academy, and Aileen asks Walt to help her investigate Selena, whom she's growing increasingly suspicious of. A short while later, Aileen finds out a love letter to Auguste has been publicly posted, so she rushes to destroy it to prevent the sequel's events from triggering. However, 3 guys stop her. Just then, Kyle shows up and scares them off, using the distraction to tear up the letter. Aileen follows him, and they both run into Walt, who informs them of a new message from Astarte. He's threatening to destroy the academy if they don't hand over the Holy Sword during the school festival. Aileen explains that 2 key events from the sequel will happen at the festival. The first is a fencing tournament hosted by the church, where one of the prizes contains an incense that turns James into a demon. If she can stop it, she can prevent the destruction of Mircetta and the bad ending. The second event is the auditions for the ball's princess. Aileen, in her duck costume, intervenes in one of the events to protect another girl from a student's bullying. Selina shows up to scold her, which only confirms Aileen's suspicions. Suddenly, she senses Claude approaching and hides. Claude sees Selina and asks her to show him around the academy, so he can protect her from Astarte's attack. Later, at the student council meeting, everyone is discussing what to do about the threat. But Selina changes the subject and starts asking for advice on how to win a man over, confessing she wants Claude to be her partner. Aileen, annoyed by this point, leaves to go on patrol, and the rest of the guys follow her. She asks them why they're tailing her, and Walt explains that none of them like talking about romance. Aileen uses this as an opportunity to try and get the group to bond a little, since she knows they're all there on a mission to assassinate James. None of them seem too keen on making friends, until the smell of incense interrupts them. Walt, Kyle, and Aileen go to find the source of the scent and discover a pipe that's spreading it through the air. James asks them what the incense is for, and they have no choice but to tell him the truth. However, James doesn't trust Aileen and leaves to tell Claude everything. Aileen quickly follows him to a fountain. There, James asks if she knows he's a demon. To prove she's on his side, Aileen asks Ribbon to come out. The Fenrir appears and licks James's face. Aileen assures him she doesn't support the demon hunters and asks if he knows Astarte. James reveals that he is Astarte, but clarifies he has nothing to do with the threats and believes someone is using his name to attack humans. On the day of the festival, Aileen, Walt, August, and Kyle dress up as ducks to search the area for any trace of incense. They split into teams and discover that the church plans to distribute incense throughout the event to trap the demon. Aileen separates from the group and tries to slip a sleeping potion into Claude's drink so he won't participate in the fencing tournament. However, her plan fails thanks to Selina, who also adds a potion to the drink, neutralizing the sedative. Aileen has no choice but to enter the fencing tournament, making it to the finals against Claude. This allows her to destroy the traps the church had set up, preventing both James and Claude from transforming into demons in front of everyone. To her surprise, Aileen finds out that Claude already knew about the traps, because Keith and Beelzebub show up to collect them for investigation. On the second day of the festival, Aileen helps Rachel sneak into the ball, as she's the best person to uncover the fake Astarte. But Selina ruins the plan by purposely damaging Rachel's dress, pushing her down the stairs. Aileen takes it personally and decides to enter the ball herself to confront Selina, with James's help. The ball begins, and the two of them manage to capture everyone's attention. When Aileen wins, she rushes to check the prizes for incense, only to find they're empty. They hurry back to the event when they hear a commotion and find Selina, who has scattered incense to expose Astarte. James is affected and transforms into a demon, attacking the group. Aileen faces him with her holy power and for a moment sees flashes of his past. She manages to convince James to return to his human form and calm down. Once he does, the group questions Selina about the incense, but they're interrupted by an army of demons appearing in the sky. Aileen summons the Holy Sword to fight. Just then, Claude appears and asks Aileen why she isn't in the capital. The next day, Claude and Aileen argue about the incense that was leaked at the academy. That's when Aileen realizes Selina knew way too much about the game's plot. She deduces that Lilia must be behind everything, since she was the only one who knew the story inside and out. Later, Aileen goes to the garden to confront Lilia and asks her if she's also a reincarnated person. Lilia admits she remembered everything as soon as the first game's events started to change. She explains she's just another player following the original plot, but she let Aileen change the story to see what a world with the villainess as the main character would be like. Aileen warns her that if she plans on hurting them, she'll have to try a lot harder and then leaves. James calls off the threats against the academy, clearing Astarte's name, and everyone goes back to their routines. Shortly after, we see Claude and Cedric talking about their grandmother. Cedric uses the chance to warn Claude to be careful, confessing that Lilia is plotting something. The scene changes to Aileen with Walt, Kyle, Augusta, and James, looking for clues about who's distributing the incense. A cloaked figure attacks Aileen, and Augusta protects her, but the attacker tells them he's an ally. He introduces himself as Eliphas and says he needs to see Claude urgently. The moment she hears his name, Aileen knows he's the final boss from the first game's fan disc. Later, Aileen takes Eliphas to Claude, and they have a chat. Aileen explains that, according to the game's lore, the Levi family is one of the few that can use magic, because the Empire believed only demons could. Because of this, society always rejected humans with that ability. 25 years ago, the Levi's declared war on the Empire to expand their territory, but they were defeated. Ever since then, their sorcerers have been secretly protecting the Imperial family. Claude says he already knows what Eliphas wants: help in getting the Levi family officially recognized by the Empire. Eliphas begs him to save his family, and Claude agrees. Next, we see Aileen taking a bath, thrilled to have a final boss on her side. However, she doesn't remember the story's details very well. She soon realizes it was all a trap when the magic in the place suddenly vanishes. The Prime Minister appears to tell her that Claude was attacked and has lost his memory. Aileen immediately goes to see the King and Queen to visit Claude, but they deny her entry. The King explains that he wants to separate Claude from the demons so he can become fully human. The Queen demands that Aileen break her engagement with Claude, but Lilia steps in, telling the Queen not to meddle in Claude's relationship. Aileen is suspicious of everything, especially when Lilia suggests holding another ball. Aileen has no choice but to agree, concluding that Lilia's plan is to restart the story to change it to her liking. After the meeting, Cedric asks Lilia if she's sure about what she's doing. Lilia asks if there's a problem, and Cedric replies that his priority is finding out who attacked Claude. Hearing that, Lilia calls him boring and leaves. Meanwhile, we see Aileen visiting the place where Claude is being held, which is protected by a magical seal. Eliphas escorts her, and they manage to get through the seal using the holy sword, but Cedric catches them. To her surprise, he gives Aileen permission to see Claude and leads her to his room. Aileen sits by the bed and strokes his body, relieved that he's still alive. Just then, Claude wakes up, and Aileen's relief turns to worry when she realizes the only person he remembers is Lilia. Claude tells her he wants to break off the engagement, but Aileen refuses and summons the holy sword, trying to jog his memory. To restart their relationship, she cuts a lock of his hair and asks him not to be unfaithful. She makes it clear that even if he's lost his memory, she'll win him over as many times as it takes, because they're meant to be together. Eliphas warns her that the guards are coming, so they both leave. Claude is left thinking about what Aileen said, wondering if she really is his fiancé. Back at the castle, Aileen gives the lock of hair to Belzebuth. She then sits down with Isaac to talk about Claude's amnesia and vows to make him remember and win his heart, no matter what. Later, the group finds out that Claude will be making a public inspection to calm the people, but he'll be accompanied by Cedric and Lilia. The informant tells Aileen that the inspection was Lilia's idea. Aileen thinks about how dangerous it is to change the game's story so drastically and asks Eliphas for his opinion on how to get Claude's memory back. He says he would try to make him remember by showing him things and recreating important events. Aileen says that won't work, since Claude had no reaction to seeing her. Eliphas suggests the reason he didn't recognize her might be the holy sword, and that it could be connected to his memories. However, he also thinks that interacting with other demons could help. Thanks to this idea, they learn that several demons have been spotted around the city. Aileen figures they must be the demons looking for Claude to bring him back to the castle. She wonders if the inspection and the appearance of the demons are connected, so she visits Claude again to ask for his help to sneak into the event. At first he says no. Aileen starts to kind of enjoy this situation, since it's the first time someone hasn't just obeyed her. But their chat is cut short by the arrival of Cedric and Lilia. Claude quickly shoves Aileen into his closet. Lilia comes in to give Claude some cookies and notices the basket Aileen left on the table. Claude tries to cover for her, saying he asked the maids for it, but when he sees she doesn't buy it, he distracts her by asking her to get some tea. Cedric uses the moment to tell Claude that a lot of demons have appeared in the city. They both sit down, and Lilia tries to force Claude to eat her cookies, but he refuses, saying Cedric is watching. Lilia leaves, and Aileen, annoyed at how she acted with someone else's fiancé, comes out of the closet to confront Claude. She tells him that it's up to him whether she gets into the inspection, and with that, she leaves. Outside, she runs into Eliphas and confesses that it hurts a lot that Claude doesn't feel the same way. Eliphas asks why she doesn't show him her more vulnerable side, reminding her that a woman's tears are a man's greatest weakness. Aileen refuses, saying she's not going to win his heart that way. Just then, Almond appears to tell her there's a fight happening at the castle. When they get there, they see Selena arguing with Augusti about the incense. Aileen stops Selena and tells her she can help her win over Cedric. Selena is shocked that she knows her secret and has no choice but to spill her plan. Her family is forcing her to marry a powerful noble. Aileen orders Augusta to let Selena go with her things, but warns her she won't be getting the incense back. Auguste returns Selena's belongings, and she leaves with Rachel as an escort. On the way, Selena confesses that she stopped trusting Lilia when she realized her greed had no limits. The day of the inspection arrives. Claude is meeting his bodyguards when he bumps into Aileen, who is once again dressed as a man. Claude quickly pulls her aside to scold her, telling her he doesn't want any trouble and to stay out of his life. Cedric steps in to break up the argument and makes Claude leave. He then tells Aileen that her attitude has always been a cause for concern for Claude. Eliphas shows up and tells Aileen that the plan is working perfectly and that he's figured out who the high-ranking official in charge of the inspection is, a man named Lester Kryn. Aileen remembers him as a romanceable character from the first game. The inspection begins and the carriage carrying Claude and Lilia is attacked by an orc. Aileen, with help from Almond and the Fenrirs, manages to stop it. The orc, in a last-ditch effort, tries to attack Aileen, blaming her for Claude's memory loss. Belzebuth stops it, explaining that all demons are connected to Claude and the orc misunderstood his orders. Aileen can't take it anymore and slaps Claude before walking away, leaving everyone stunned. Later, we see Claude thinking about what happened, still feeling the sting of the slap. Belzebuth and Keith enter his room, and Claude recognizes Belzebuth. Keith asks Claude if it's possible he projected his feelings to the demons in a distorted way. Claude is silent for a moment, then gets up and orders them both to bring Aileen to a ball that's about to start. Keith goes to the castle with the same dress Aileen wore to Cedric and Lilia's ball, and tells her that Claude wants to see her at the event. At first, Aileen refuses, but all the demons start dancing to convince her. That night, Aileen is telling Rachel about her failed attempts to win over Claude, who has been acting very cold toward her. Rachel finishes her makeup, and Aileen heads to the ball. As soon as she arrives, she becomes the center of attention, even catching the eye of the group that was there to keep watch. Claude, seeing her in a duck head, picks her up and carries her to a more private spot. She asks him what he's doing, and he takes off the duck head and gives her a hug. He confesses that his body seems to know instinctively how much force to use so as not to hurt her. He also reveals that Keith suggested he say her name. Claude leans into her ear and repeats her name several times, making her nervous. He tells her that, with or without his memories, his love for her is still there, and that he thinks it might all be fate. Aileen understands what he's trying to do and decides to forgive him for everything he said. Claude leaves to start the ball, and Aileen goes with Rachel to get ready. When she's alone, Eliphas stabs her with a dagger. She asks him why, and Eliphas replies that he expected nothing from love, but things didn't go the way he wanted. He uses a spell to show her Almond, who is badly injured. Eliphas uses the distraction to pour the church's incense on Aileen's dress, then calls the guards, who come in to arrest her. Lester informs the king and queen that Aileen's plan was to put the Dark Lord on the throne to rule alongside the demons. Eliphas manipulates everyone there, convincing them that Aileen was just using Claude and even claiming she was cheating on him. To top it off, he asserts that the entire team Aileen hired was working to betray him. August, furious, tries to confront him, but Isaac and the others hold him back. Claude asks Aileen if any of it is true. She, feeling trapped and fearing for Almond's life, has no choice but to insult Claude in front of everyone. But Almond manages to escape his prison and tells Claude that Aileen is lying. Eliphas, with no other option, uses his magic to silence him, killing him right in front of Aileen. This event causes Claude to remember everything, but the spell he's under causes him excruciating pain. The king and queen seize the opportunity to order Aileen's execution. August, James, Isaac, and Kyle band together to protect her. Claude, in a desperate move, uses his magic to teleport the entire group back to his castle. There, James tells Keith and Belzebuth that the humans are planning to attack the demons. Aileen asks Isaac if he knows an escape route, and he tells her about a 100-year-old underground passage. All the demons head there to escape and find safety. Meanwhile, Claude is thinking about Almond's death. Lilia approaches him and tells him he's just a side character, the Dark Lord, and that he can't be with Aileen, the protagonist. Claude ignores her, and Lilia mentions that it's the first time she's had this much trouble activating a romance route, so she has no choice but to eliminate him. With that said, she summons the Holy Sword, and Claude realizes she was the one who stole his memories. Without wasting a second, Lilia uses the incense on Claude to turn him into a demon. At the same time, the group manages to escape to the mountains, but the human army is about to catch up to them. Aileen tells them to flee with the demons, but Eliphas finds them and attacks her. She fights back by activating the Holy Sword and lunges at him. The scene shifts, and we now see Aileen locked in a dungeon with Eliphas. There, she learns that the church was planning a coup, and Aileen warns Eliphas that his family will be in danger if he doesn't do something. Eliphas replies that everything is happening just as Lilia predicted, which means the future can't be changed. Aileen asks if Lilia is his boss, but he denies it, explaining he works for the Queen of the Empire, but is in love with Lilia. Aileen gives him a look of disgust and presses him for more details. Eliphas tells her he first spoke with Lilia 6 months ago. Aileen cuts him off, saying she already knows the game's script. Eliphas takes the chance to reveal that Lilia has recovered the Holy Sword. In that moment, Aileen understands that Lilia seduced Eliphas and deliberately altered the game's events. Eliphas tells her he can no longer use the sword's magic because she stole it from him. Hearing this, Aileen understands why she's been feeling stronger and summons it to break out of the dungeon. Eliphas, wanting to make up for his mistake, rips out one of his eyes, telling her it's one of a sorcerer's most powerful magical items and that with it, he can free Claude from Lilia's control. Aileen decides to free him, saying she'll need his help to stop the coup in the capital. Meanwhile, James and the others are surrounded by the Empire's troops, but Selena shows up to help them escape. Back with Aileen, she asks Eliphas why the Queen teamed up with the sorcerers of the Levi family. He explains that the Queen uses their magic to stay young. As they're escaping, they run into a stampede of demons released by Isaac. Aileen goes up to him and asks why they're following him. Isaac replies that the demons felt Claude's call, who is being tortured by Lilia, and they're all desperate to save him. Aileen has no choice but to stand in front of the stampede and stop it with the holy sword. Beelzebub tries to confront her, but she holds him back with her holy power and tries to calm him down, promising she'll be the one to rescue Claude. He gives her an ultimatum. She has until sunset, and if she's not back with Claude by then, they will attack the humans. James contacts Aileen through her shadow and tells her he's found Claude, who is unconscious on a tombstone, having been drugged with incense. Aileen asks Selena if she knows anything about a secret treasure the Queen has. She gives her the location based on rumors, says goodbye to the group, and heads to the place with Eliphas. When they arrive at the tower where the treasure is hidden, they find Lilia waiting for them. She's surprised to see Eliphas is still alive and confesses she only raised his affinity level to trigger his death event because she loved that part of the story. Aileen draws her sword and remarks that the holy sword Lilia has was probably obtained by completing Lester's romance route. They both draw their swords and the fight begins. The clash of their weapons causes an explosion in the castle. Meanwhile, the demons, growing more and more worried about Claude, gather with Aileen's employees, who have come to treat the wounded. Back in the fight, Aileen realizes she's at a disadvantage against Lilia when she notices she's cheating by boosting stats that shouldn't be upgradable. Lilia explains that only the story's heroine can do that and wonders why the villain doesn't have higher stats. Eliphas tries to sneak into the treasure chamber while Lilia is distracted, but a magical seal blocks his way. Lilia boasts that she placed the seal herself with the holy sword's help and goes to attack Eliphas, but Aileen intercepts, blocking the blow. They trade several attacks until a thrust pierces Lilia's hand. She tries to absorb the holy sword, but Aileen uses Claude's magic to push her back. Lilia, alarmed, desperately blocks a slash and asks Aileen if she's planning to kill Claude by absorbing his energy, but Aileen assures her that won't happen. Lilia's holy sword shatters and the slash destroys the magical seal. Eliphas tries to enter the chamber, but to his surprise, it's still sealed. Lilia starts laughing mockingly at the situation and knocks Aileen down, who realizes Claude's energy is fading, meaning his death is near. Eliphas uses all his power to break down the door, but Lilia stops him, throwing him to the ground. As she's about to attack, she realizes Almond is still alive, and he's the one who breaks down the treasure room door. Lilia can't believe her eyes. Eliphas seizes the opportunity to enter the treasure chamber and uses his eye to shut down the machine that was keeping the Queen young. She instantly ages, suffering the consequences. Aileen, overjoyed, thinks they've won. However, the Imperial Guard appears to execute her for treason. Everyone's swords are shattered, and suddenly, Claude appears in the sky. He orders the guards to stand down. One of them tells him he can't give orders, but Cedric steps in to back Claude up, revealing that since the Queen is indisposed due to her old age, Claude is now in charge. He also announces that Lester has been accused of being the one who brought the incense into the country. With that said, he kneels before Claude. Claude, in turn, gives Aileen a hug and tells her it's all finally over. Sometime later, it's announced that the Queen has stepped down and Claude takes on the duty of protecting the Levi family, while everyone else returns to their quiet lives. Aileen finally marries Claude, happy that she managed to get the happy ending for her story. But well, if you've made it this far, comment the word Daisuki to let me know you've reached the end. Here on the screen, I leave you with these two cool videos, just like the person watching this video. See you next time. Take care, drink water, take a shower, and bye.